Welcome to Women Who Move Nations, a podcast by the Public Transport Association, Australia, New Zealand. Each episode, we interview top female executives from the public transport sector in Australia, New Zealand, and around the world. If you're interested in leadership, workplace gender equality, or building clean, green transport for the future, this is the podcast for you. This season is proudly sponsored by NEC Smart Transport Solutions. Find out more at nec.com.au. Now here's your host, Michelle Batsis.
Kia ora koutou. Welcome to this episode of Women Who Move Nations. Ko Rowan Sauerdahl's taku ingoa. I'm your guest host for today. I'm a public transport advisor within the National Initiatives team at Waka Kotahi New Zealand Transport Agency, and I'm also one of PTANZ's emerging mobility leaders. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest today, Mel, or Melanie Barber, Managing Director at NEC New Zealand. Mel joined NEC from Venture when she was the project director for the UFB2 Plus project. Ultra-fast broadband. This was a $120 million project bringing fibre to New Zealand's rural communities. Mel is described as a transformational leader who believes in empowering her team to achieve the key priorities of the business. She leads with empathy and realism, and she brings her authentic self to work every day. Mel, thank you so much for joining us today. I thought it would be good idea to kick off with a bit of background about how you came into the smart transportation / public transport / technology industry. Was it a clear career path for you?
Not at all. And so I am one of those people that never really had a career path, if I'm honest about it all. So like you said, my background was very much in utilities. So working on the number one UFB project, the main one in the cities, and then the UFB2 Plus. And for those of you in Australia, that's essentially the same as NBN. Mm-hmm. And so taking the opportunity to move to NEC, which was very much a technology company, smart transport, and certainly the public transport side of things was really new, but it's been amazing to see the difference that when you merge technology with public transport, what a visible, tangible difference that makes to users' experiences.
No, I think that's really interesting and a modern view of the public transport industry as well. Quite exciting to hear. I wanted to talk a little bit more about projects like the ultra-fast broadband projects that you did at Venture. That is one of many projects you've been involved in that deliver a public good on behalf of another organisation, whether that be a local authority or another private organisation. I was wondering, with that in mind, do you kind of have any reflections on how to navigate that delivery environment? And more specifically, is there kind of any difficulty with engaging with key stakeholders like community groups and projects like that?
I think the key thing when you're engaging with those stakeholders, so UFB2 Plus had a lot of different iwis. I think when we were working in the Nelson region, I think we ended up with 9 iwis having an interest in one of the towns that we were working in. And it's just about, it's going in and being open and honest with what you don't know. And it's not going in with preconceived ideas. You know, you can't walk into any public meeting and say, oh, they're going to be excited about this, they're going to hate this thing, and oh my gosh, they're just going to haul me over the coals for this other thing, which isn't to say you don't be prepared for those tough questions, but you really need to go in with an open mind and try and take that time to understand what their actual concerns are or their excitement is, as opposed to deciding in your head before you get there, this is what it's going to be. We spent a lot of time with iwi. I was working in Waimarama, which is in the Hawke's Bay, beautiful part of the country. And working with that iwi when we started, they had a lot of concerns, which if we'd taken them on face value, would have slowed everything down and it would have stopped us being able to connect that community. But because we took the time to work with them and to understand and to have the conversations, their concern was actually something completely different. And we started work the next week, but it was having a real honest conversation with them rather than just assuming that we knew what was best or what they were thinking.
In that UFB2 Plus project, what did that sort of conversation look like? Was it like targeted workshops in each of the regions as you were working in that region? Or could you talk a little bit more about that? I'm really interested in that.
So we did a variety of things. So Ventia worked for Chorus through a major company over here in New Zealand. They would work in partnership with us. So we would work with the iwi to understand their needs, particularly if there were heritage concerns. But then we'd also go out quite often and do essentially a mini town hall, but we'd always do it in a cafe in the afternoon or in the early evening so that members of the public could attend, and there was generally no big speech and no big presentation. It was literally just having people involved in the project with enough knowledge to be able to answer people's questions. So members of the public could just come in, they'd sit down with an individual and have a one-on-one conversation and form that connection, as opposed to making people come and sit in a school hall and listen to us pontificate about how wonderful it was going to be. We could have those one-on-one conversations and build a connection with the community. So I was essentially working in about 25 towns at a time around New Zealand, from the very top down to the very bottom. And so we obviously didn't have civil crews based in all of those areas. So they would go to those communities, I'd stay in those communities, I'd build relationships, they would be able to give back to the local, four squares or takeaway stores, or because these small towns that have a four square and a takeaway store was quite often the exception, but they would also do a lot of work. And I know I had a crew in the Coromandel after one of the big weather events that they had there, and they actually spent a couple of days helping the local community clean up, what is the impact. And that giving back and that wanting to be a part of the community, because they were there for sometimes 3 months, just really helped build those strong connections.
That's really interesting, the meeting the stakeholders, in this case the public, on their ground is really kind of lovely. Do you think it's unique to that project? Do you think it happens enough? Like meaningful engagement, one-on-one, like person-to-person sort of engagement?
I think it probably doesn't happen enough, and I can understand certainly why it can't be done all of the time, particularly if you're a regional council or similar. I understand why you can't do it, but I guess it's trying to have that balance, right? And I think sometimes it's people are afraid of being able to be vulnerable and sit down with somebody and have a question to your face that you may or may not know the answer to. Some of the questions you'd get asked, you'd kind of be like, I'm not sure, but let me find out and I'll come back to you. And it can be quite confronting for people to be able to put themselves out there in a position where they don't know what's coming next and they don't know the question that's coming. It's a lot safer for people to stand up and say, here's my slideshow that I prepared earlier, and hopefully that's answered all of your questions. But a lot of the time it does come down to time and money, and do you have the actual ability to be able to reach everybody that you need to reach if you do it in that one-on-one way.
That's really interesting and kind of makes my heart swell a bit. I would steer the conversation back to the public transport space. And not to say that consultation is not a key element of working in the public transport sector. We can all kind of attest to that. But I was wondering if you have any sort of big ideas about what you see as the next kind of key technological advancement that will shape the future of public transport. Like, what's the next big step for public transport in terms of integration with technology? Is it a la Blade Runner hover cars or something a little more realistic?
If you talk to some of our sales guys, I think it's like flying buses. But I think it's really going to be how we incorporate AI into what we already do. So if you look at a solution like SCATS, where you're using traffic, cameras and traffic lights and being able to prioritize buses so that they can go faster, which means more people want to use them. At the moment, that's done on data, but as we be able to weave in more AI, that allows us to be able to make instant changes to what's happening. So if a crash happens, it can get picked up straight away. We've got some really cool technology that actually allows you to be able to put a camera on, say, the front of a bus, and as it's going down the road, if there's cars parked in the bus lane, it can automatically send a ping through to the tow company or to the right people at the councils to say, hey, there's actually cars blocking this bus lane and it goes into operation in 45 minutes. So could you pop out there and be ready to move them? And just being able to have that real-time information is going to be huge. Even, having a fixed timetable, a paper timetable stapled to a pole somewhere, that just becomes a thing of the past too, right? As people use apps and as we can have real-time information on signs, that allows people to have more faith in the system. And then therefore that encourages people to be able to use public transport because they can plan their lives around it. They're not going, oh, do I want to take the bus today? Is it going to turn up? Oh, it says it's 15 minutes away. Is it 15 minutes? Oh, I'll just take the car. It's easier. But if people have that faith in the reliability of the system, then that does encourage them to go, oh, a bus stop's 4 minutes away. It's 5 minutes coming. I'll leave my house now and I'll be there in plenty of time. So I think that's going to make a massive difference. And then it's also focusing on that public safety. So certainly in Auckland, there's been quite a few cases recently where at transport hubs, bus stations and the like, there's been some unruly activity. Yeah. People are now worried about their children catching public transport. Is it safe? What's going to happen to them? And just the use of technology, not in a creepy, not in a, we're going to overreach and spy on people type of way, but just having the right systems in place to help keep things safe for all users that don't have to then rely on having, security guards at every single bus stop all of the time.
I think kind of picking up on what you were talking about before about making public transport more accessible or more so building the reputation of being reliable by having all of this like better information, real-time information that a customer can, look on their phone and see that a bus is coming in 5 minutes, and it does come in 5 minutes because it's, fully accurate and being updated constantly. I think from my perspective, that's really, really valuable because there is kind of that aura of unreliability, at least in New Zealand. We've had some bus driver shortages and some issues over COVID. I think everybody's had it, but it's, we can definitely speak from a New Zealand perspective. And there just seems to be a really big gap between people who already use PT and people who don't, but are kind of interested, but don't really know how to get in. And I think having, just more information and that real-time information is just so, so valuable for that. And it's kind of really exciting to me as well. I'm a big diehard bleed blue in terms of the public transport. But, all of my kind of peers that don't already use it just have this unshakable perception of it being as kind of like a bit of a loser cruiser, dusty. But this is real-time information is one example of it being, it's not that, it's shiny and new. And
that's it. There's nothing worse than on a cold, windy day in Wellington, sitting outside, waiting for the bus to come going, is it here yet? Oh, it's 15 minutes. It's been 15 minutes for the last 30 minutes. And so being able to upgrade those solutions just means that, if it's 15 minutes, it's 15 minutes. You go and get yourself a coffee and wait in a warm cafe somewhere before you come back, as opposed to thinking it's 15 minutes and then watching it go past as you're waiting for your coffee to be made.
Yeah, and in the inverse, no more ghost buses as well, yes. Which is kind of a spooky concept, but is very real, unlike the real life counterpart. I wanted to ask you a little bit about a specific project that NEC is working on in Wellington, which is where I'm talking from right now. So NEC is collaborating with Metlink, so that's a public transport arm of Greater Wellington Regional Council, to sort of do a general upgrade of the public transport system's real-time information capabilities, with a key feature being text-to-speech units. And I was wondering if there are kind of any examples across the world of, it doesn't necessarily have to be public transport, but just the transport sector using technology to make a certain mode more accessible to those differently abled that you think should be implemented more widely?
So, there's a few examples if you look outside the public transport, particularly being able to use your face as your boarding pass for your plane, if you are differently abled or you're actually just trying to juggle 15 bags and 3 kids, being able to just walk through as opposed to trying to find your passport, which one of the kids has probably run off with, around the corner, to get onto planes, that type of technology certainly helps. But in regards to more public transport, there's some really cool technology out there where we can use people's phones, and all NEC technology is always opt-in, like whenever the place that says you must. But if you were, say, blind or low vision, you could have your phone connected so that as your electric bus, which funnily enough doesn't make a whole lot of noise, is approaching, it will actually, you can actually buzz your phone. And so you're aware that your bus is coming. And it can also then alert the driver to say, hey, there's somebody getting on that may need some additional help, so just be aware. And then being able to, when you're tagging on, have your phone close enough that it then connects and it tags you on and it tags you off, as opposed to trying to find the, the small tag that someone that's fully visually, is fine. But if you're visually impaired, then that just adds a whole other aspect of difficulty, and a reason why you wouldn't potentially use public transport as much. So some of those types of solutions, they just help make people's lives easier and better. Like you say, we've got text to speech, so you can just push the button to hear when your bus is coming, but that doesn't help if you can't actually hear the bus.
That's really interesting. I have kind of another sort of sub question, which is a little bit related to the previous, but when we think of the concept of accessibility, we're thinking about, being differently abled, according to location or just available transport modes or just personal circumstance, so, physically disabled or whatever. I was wondering what your kind of opinions are on access to technology. Like, is that as big a barrier as one would think? Do you think there's kind of not an issue, or maybe a growing issue that we need to address about the public transport sector, a public good becoming increasingly sort of brought into the future in terms of all this incredible technology, but there still being a group of people who might be left behind because they don't have the skills or ability to interact with that technology?
Oh, definitely. And I think, we're really focused on anything that we do in terms of trying not to leave people behind. My dad's probably a really good use case in terms of he can text. Sometimes it takes a minute to figure out what he's written, but he can text and he can send photos. But anything else, he's just genuinely not interested in learning. He's more than capable of learning it, but he doesn't see the need for it. So he doesn't do internet banking and he doesn't pay his bills online. He likes to go in and do them. And so we are really aware that we need to make sure there's always options for people. And I think, the difficulty always comes down to funding, right? Once you get to a certain level of people using technology, then it becomes really hard to justify to stakeholders and ratepayers and taxpayers why we're looking after that minority. Right? But it's just so important from an ethics perspective to make sure that we're not leaving people behind. And we are cognizant of people's financial or just their personal preferences, and being able to ensure that people aren't then disadvantaged because they don't have those same technology advantages.
I think that is, a really important thing to note, that, it's something you can't necessarily control. There are always going to be kind of constraints or just limitations, but being aware of it is really important. I think that's especially important in the public transport space. At Waka Kotahi, our kind of fundamental understanding of public transport is that it provides access to opportunities for people who can't or don't want to or won't use other transport modes. So just kind of having that awareness sort of wrapped around us at all times is really important from at Waka Kotahi and the whole sector. I think you've really articulated that beautifully. I thought I might transition into talking a little bit about leadership and people management. So obviously you're likely adept at that as managing director at NEC New Zealand. I was wondering if, looking back, if you had any early career experiences that you think shape your approach to leadership and management today.
So if I look back even 10 years ago, my leadership style was really different to how it is now. And I think part of that was being in such time-constrained projects that I became very focused on, we've just got to get it done, and we just need to go. And sometimes I would just forget that actually there were people involved in these things. Right? Well, if I can do 20 things at once, I don't understand why you can't. It's not that hard. Let's go. I was fortunate enough to have some coaching relatively early on in my, and I'll call it a management career, right? Because I was a manager then. But certainly having that coaching and just having, and she's an absolutely phenomenal woman, she still works now out of Christchurch, who can just ask the right questions and make you reflect on the things that you're doing and how you could do things differently. And that really helps me to start thinking about actually the people side of leadership and the importance of empowering people and growing people to get the results that you need. Because, you know, it comes back to that old saying, I guess you can get a lot more flies with honey than with vinegar. And it's similar when you're working with people, right? You can be a very directive person and be like, we need this now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the best out of your people.
PTA ANZ is proud to bring you Season 7 of the Women Who Move Nations public transport podcast in partnership with NEC Australia. With over a century of innovation and a strong commitment to creating a brighter, more inclusive world, NEC is dedicated to gender equality and diverse perspectives and is amplifying the voices of women leaders in public transport. Struggling to hold on to your drivers? Transform your bus operations with NEC's Turn by Turn, the first bus navigation system built to reduce driver onboarding and training significantly. Head to nec.com.au/STS.
I wonder if you could kind of expound on, you know, talked about centering people and capability in your leadership style. I was wondering if you could kind of expand on your sort of other leadership practices or routines. Do you have in my team we do high-low buffalo for building team capabilities. I was wondering if you kind of have a similar thing. Maybe yours might sound a little more elevated than our stuff.
No, but now I want to know what high-low buffalo is. So we've spent a lot of time as a leadership team making sure that we connect on a deeper level. And so Patrick Lencioni wrote a really good book called The Advantage, which talks about you can only really get to having a high-functioning business if your leadership team is all functioning in the right way. And the basis of that is being able to trust each other. You can't do the trust unless you get to know each other. So we've had a few really good offsites. We actually, a couple of years ago, went away for a night to someone's batch in Owakuni, so right in the middle of the North Island, for those of you who aren't in New Zealand, and there's not a lot there, but it was a beautiful batch. And just spending some time with each other, but then really working on the fact that when we're a leadership team, you put on your leadership team hat. So you might be the business unit leader of Smart Transport, or you might be our business unit leader of biometrics, or you might look after our people and culture part of the business. But when you're in a leadership team business, you take off your BU hat and you put on a leadership team hat, and you're looking at what is best for the wider business and how do we make decisions that move the whole business forward, as opposed to purely being focused on your small part of the business and only going, well, I'm going to make decisions of what's best for me. Changing that to how do we make the best decisions for NEC New Zealand.
That's really interesting. I was also kind of pivoting a little bit. So I was very lucky to visit you, Mel, in the NEC Wellington office and the Innovation Lab, which was genuinely really cool. And I've been telling all my coworkers about it, bragging. That was one of my high-low buffaloes. It was my high that day. You know, to me, it really seemed that you had a really sort of open door, sort of flat, open sort of office. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, about kind of building team capability outside of the leadership team. Or less capability, more team connections outside of the leadership team. Maybe not at NEC or any previous roles as well.
Yeah, no, we work really hard on that at NEC, and we are a really flat structure, and we don't stand on very much ceremony. I'm based in Auckland. I don't even have a desk in the Wellington office, let alone an office in the Wellington office. I'll literally turn up and find a desk that's vacant and perch myself there, which just means then I can have those ad hoc conversations with people, and people see me as someone that is approachable, as opposed to, right, I'm the managing director, I'm going to turn up, I'll wave as I walk in, and then I'll shut myself in my office and you'll lock the door. And that's what we try and do across all of NEC. All of the leadership team are approachable. We spend a lot of time with our people, just in a really relaxed environment. There's a great social club in the Wellington office, which is really driven by the Wellington team. So, they do lunches and Christmas events, and we do try to make, so we do a korero, which is what we call our town hall. We do that once a quarter, but it's always finished with, some beer and pizza afterwards, so that people can then get that one-on-one connection with people. Because the more, to my earlier point, the more you can build a genuine connection with people, the more that they feel that they can come to you with good ideas or a different way of doing things. And it doesn't mean that every idea that comes to us we implement, but it means that people feel safe being able to try something new or suggest something different to do without feeling like if it goes wrong, there's going to be a ton of bricks coming down on them, or they're going to be held over hot coals as punishment for it. It's about we want to try new things, and we can only know the right things to try if we get that input from our people. We can't lead the business purely just as a leadership team.
I think that's really nice to hear as a newbie to the I don't know, the professional world, the corporate world. Something I can really speak to at Waka Kotahi. We have the same sort of thing about, I see our Nicole Rosie on the floor quite a lot in her lovely pink jacket. She's very conspicuous. And I just think it's kind of really incredible, and also seems to me quite a departure from previous workplace sort of rigorous hierarchical structures. It's kind of really refreshing to see. I wanted to ask you kind of about balancing having a diverse team. You work across a whole bunch of sort of subtopics in the technology and transport industries. Like, how do you kind of navigate that? I could put that in better words. What are the most challenging aspects of leading a diverse team that sits at the nexus of technology and transport industries, and how do you navigate it?
So NEC is a global company, so that makes it even more interesting. Yep. And there's been a lot of work done at NEC to not be a Japanese company that also operates all over the world. And certainly the focus over the last few years has been, how do we turn NEC into a truly global company, and where everybody's opinion is as valid. And so that means you end up with having multiple stakeholders who all have their own individual view on how things should be run and what should come next and how we do things. And, New Zealand is a very small country affiliate by NEC standards. And, the reality is we're a small country at the bottom of the Pacific. Luckily, we're quite good at having a voice across our business and building those relationships into Japan so that we can influence it. None of us are backwards and coming forwards. And so we can certainly have an opinion, and they will either get taken up or not, but they are certainly heard and they're listened to. But sometimes it's actually just blocking out some of that noise and just going, well, actually, what are our key strategic goals? And sometimes the benefit of being a small island at the bottom of the Pacific is that you have that freedom to just go, do you know what, we're going to focus on what we really need to do to be successful, and we'll work with the stuff that comes through from all the other places, but we just need to stick to our knitting and achieve that way.
I think that is really kind of valuable to think about, especially, in the context of this podcast. It's for Public Transport Association, Australia, New Zealand. Like, we have a unique sort of environment because we are so isolated, not from each other, but from the rest of the sort of world. And I think it really does, you're really right, that it does kind of free us up to sort of do our own thing. And I think, in the public transport context, we've been kind of really putting our front foot forward in terms of decarbonisation and having an electric fleet. I know obviously it's in play in other parts of the world, but I feel like, in New Zealand, we've really kind of striding ahead. Quite exciting. So I wanted to talk a bit about being a woman who moves a nation. I wanted to sort of ask about, so obviously, not really a surprise, both technology and transport are historically very male-dominated industries. I was wondering, Can you kind of pinpoint how you think that those industries, technology and transport, could benefit from sort of achieving greater gender diversity, especially in leadership roles? And then kind of as a sub-question, how do we get that diversity in the first place if we don't have it?
Yeah, statistically, it's still, I mean, we're 33% of our leaders across the business are female, which is, to your point, high for the technology, sectors. And I come from utilities, which I would quite often walk into a meeting and be the only female in the room. But I think, every part of the market benefits from diversity. And it's not just gender diversity. It's how do we capture people from all walks of life who have had different experiences and see things in a different way? Because that's how you make the best decisions. Because, there's research out there that shows if you had only female leaders in a business, then you then don't have that same diversity of thought, and you just the same as having a bunch of male leaders. You need true diversity to be able to understand different perspectives and think differently so that you can challenge each other and then end up with the best outcome for your business. It's really important, I think, in terms of how do we increase it, is going back all of those steps right back to the schoolyard, because the reality is you can only be what you can see. And so if you never have any concept of female leader or female prime minister, you don't think that it's possible for you. And we sponsor a wheelchair para-athlete, Gabby Wright, who's phenomenal. And so her whole dream in life was to be a silver fern. She got sick when she was 12 and ended up in a wheelchair. And she's just inspirational. She's a para-athlete. She takes every opportunity that she can. She got a phone call going, "Would you like to do the Sydney Marathon?" She's like, "Jeepers, I've never done a marathon in my life, but okay, sure." And so we actually had her go and visit a local school in Wellington and speak to a couple of the classes and say, "Well, this happened to me, and you know what? It kind of sucked at the time, but look at what you can still achieve in your life, and why would you let something happening to you stop you from achieving your dreams?" And so I think it's being able to showcase different people, different types of people, that true diversity way back when, and then when it is moving into the workforce, really providing those opportunities, like Rowan, for you to be the emerging mobility leader. That gives you the opportunity to form different relationships and see things that you wouldn't see just as your role as an advisor at Waka Kotahi and ZTA. So making sure that we can provide those opportunities for people, that's how we're going to increase it. It has to be a conscious choice. We can't just sit back and expect it to magically happen.
Totally. And I think, when, we're both working on projects that are, our end product is delivering an end product for the public. When our stakeholder, the public, is diverse and our team that's working on it isn't, there's something wrong there. And I think, just kind of expanding our minds. I guess we only know, as you say, I don't remember exactly what you said, but, we only know what we know.
Well, that's it. And I mentor a young girl. She's 15 now, because we're into year 3. And part of that whole mentoring program was really about opening our eyes to be able to say, "Oh, I didn't know I could have. Is that a job? Can I do that as a job? Well, what does that mean?" And I'm not saying I sit down and teach you how to be a leader every day. It's normally more chips and a Coke somewhere, but opening her up. So I'm always make sure I'm sending her photos when I'm traveling for work to be like, well, this could be your life. And the only thing stopping it from being your life is what you choose to do.
Yeah. Could you talk a little more about that, you being a mentor? How did you kind of get into that, and what do you see as the benefits for you as well? It's obviously she's getting good benefits, but curious how it falls back on you a little bit.
I think I just looked at my life and, in the world of Facebook, it popped up as an opportunity in our local community here in the Hibiscus Coast. And I went, you know what, like I'm privileged enough to have a good life. My daughter is actually now 22, so I don't have that juggle. There's some people that do it and they've got young kids, and I have to take my hat off to them. Like juggling multiple would be a challenge that I may not have been brave enough to take up. And it is, and it's been amazing to see the change in her over the last 3 years now. The first time I met her, she literally wouldn't say a word to me. It was like pulling teeth, and I walked away and I was talking to the coordinator and I was like, what have I done? She seems a nice kid, but I wouldn't know because she said 4 words the entire time. Her mother's lovely. But, certainly as we've built that relationship, she was very adamant she was never going to go kayaking. And then one day she was like, actually, could we? And I was like, of course we can. She went out in the kayak. She got in. She was like, I'm not doing this. I hate it. And I was like, hey, I'm up to my waist in water. So you'll stay in the kayak for a little minute just to give it a go. And now it's her favourite thing to do. She loves being out on the water, even after, 5 minutes of going, I hate this. She's like, no, actually, I really like this. I love doing this. And it's really rewarding to see that growth in her. She wouldn't order her own food when we went out. She was just too shy and she didn't want to. And now she's more than, really confident and able to do that stuff. So it's been cool. And she's almost part of the family now. She knows my husband and they've got a good relationship where she'll tease him about smelling bad and he'll tease her back the same. But it's just this really nice extra family for her, to go along with her strong whānau.
That's really incredible. I wonder, did you kind of have a mentor or somebody that you looked up to professionally, kind of continuing the cycle, but the other way?
I think when I was starting out in my career, there probably weren't that many women professionally, within the industries that I worked in to look up to, because I think in the first, when I was at Ventia, which is where I really started being a leader, I think there was, at times one woman on the leadership team, and it's kind of, but, I think over my career, I'm inspired by different women all the time in terms of the different ways they handle situations. So NEC's got this amazing, fantastic network of women across Australia and New Zealand. And there's a really good community of women who have had different experiences through their lives. And they're brave enough to share those stories. And the amount of times you listen, people that are that kind of sandwich generation. So they're juggling their kids growing up and ill parents and holding down, demanding role. Seeing people do all of these things and still come to work and do an amazing job, but also have the ability to bring their personality still, and they have fun and they have a laugh, that I think just helps inspire me, but it also helps inspire the wider business.
Yeah, there's kind of such strength in, it's a lot of things to do in our sort of traditional gender roles as being a woman, that, so much work happening outside of the workplace as well, that it's really kind of incredible just to hear about how people navigate that. And I'm 24. I'm tip my hat because the extent of my obligations starts and ends with a 14-year-old fat ginger cat and 2 male flatmates. So that's kind of, I just think that's absolutely incredible. We have a similar sort of wahine network here at Waka Kotahi, and obviously having the Emerging Mobility Leaders Committee is really just kind of brings home how important it is to foster these sort of communities of learning and just keeping those kind of communication lines open. Kind of with that, final question, I was wondering if you could share your top piece of advice for people like myself who are early on in their career in the, as we said before, public transport / smart transportation / technology industries.
I think the biggest thing is taking every opportunity and believing in yourself. It would have been really easy for you, Rowan, when they said, hey, here's this amazing opportunity, to be like, oh, no, I probably shouldn't do that. I'm probably not the right person. I'm probably not good enough. And certainly as females, there's a whole host of research out there that supports it. So it's really about finding those things that you're passionate about, because then that will show through. But having that belief in yourself and knowing that you're in the position that you're in, and it's not through luck or by chance, or you just happen to turn up, or they were like, oh, jeepers, we need someone, oh, Rowan will do. You're in that role that you're in because you've earned it. It's your abilities and it's the things that you've done And it's the way you put yourself out there and taking opportunities that they've arisen. That's what gets you to being able to be, an emerging leader. Right? You could have sat back. And I was actually at an event recently where Nicola Willis spoke. And when John Key rang her and said, would you like to have this role? She was like, oh, no, I'm too young for that. And I'm only to say, oh, no. And he's like, I didn't ask you why you couldn't do it. I asked you if you'd like to do it. And I think particularly as women, we need to remember that if we get offered opportunities, it's because we've earned those opportunities and you need to take them.
Yeah, I think that beast of imposter syndrome is just really overly prolific. I think we talked a little bit about this before, Mel, but just, saying that, having that sort of always in your mind that you've been offered these opportunities because you deserve it, and just say yes.
Oh, look, and that's how I ended up in the managing director role. The existing managing director turned up one day and said, oh, by the way, I've resigned and you've got an interview in a couple of days. And I was like, sorry, what? What now? Sorry, what? And I would have been really easy to say, no, I'm good, thanks. I've only been in my SLT role for 3 months. I'll leave it and I'll go for it the next time around. But it was grasping that opportunity and knowing that I'd earned my place at the table.
Yeah. Do you have any sort of advice or at least reflections on, that experience of stretching your kind of perception of what you could do and reconciling it with what you have done?
And I think I still struggle with it. I think when we spoke about imposter syndrome, I was like, jeepers, I can't be on that podcast. Have you seen the women that have been on that podcast? Like, jeepers. And so it really does come down. And look, as a leader, I know I'm responsible for creating that atmosphere at work where people do feel that they can take those chances and they can try new things. That's certainly part of being a leader. But it's scary, right? It's that whole thing of change is uncomfortable, and you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable because that's the way you're going to grow.
Yeah. We need that printed on a t-shirt. Thank you, Mel, so much for your time today and for what has been a truly kind of interesting, exciting, insightful conversation.
Yeah, genuinely thank you for your time, and it's been great getting to know you, and I hope that we do continue to have an ongoing, professional relationship, and looking forward to hearing the recording when it comes out.
Certainly. So that was Mel Barber, Managing Director at NEC New Zealand. And I've been your guest host, Rowan Sawardals, and you've been listening to Women Who Move Nations, the public transport podcast.
Thank you for listening to Women Who Move Nations, the public transport podcast. We're proud to deliver this episode in partnership with NEC Smart Transport Solutions. To find out more, visit nec.com.au. This series is produced by Jamie Leowen and Sophia Dickinson for the Public Transport Association Australia, New Zealand. To find out more, please visit our website ptaanz.org. Tune in for more soon.